I was standing over my husband's body when I realized that no silence is as cruel as the one that reveals a lie too late. As I adjusted the necklace around his neck for the last time, the funeral attendant pulled something folded from his shirt pocket. A yellowed photograph, hidden as if it were a living secret. It was Thomas, smiling, with his arm around a teenage girl I had never seen before. On the back, 2 words that tore apart 30 years of marriage in a single blow. For Dad. My hands trembled, because we were never able to have children, and he knew the weight that absence carried in me. Before I could breathe, a woman I had never seen approached, held my hands with an intimacy she had no right to, and whispered, "He was everything to me." Then she slipped away through the room like a shadow that knows exactly where it belongs. In that moment, I realized I wasn't burying just a husband. I was burying the version of life he allowed me to see. If you've ever loved someone with your whole soul, if you've ever given decades believing you were building a safe home, I need you to stay with me until the end of this story. Because what I began to uncover at that funeral wasn't grief. It was the violence of revelation. And when the truth begins to rise, it doesn't warn you, it doesn't ask permission. It simply destroys everything you believed. Before we go on, I ask you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because today I'm going to tell you how I discovered that the man I slept beside for 3 decades was sharing his soul with another family while I dreamed alone. The morning after the funeral, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if the air inside the house had shifted places. The silence wasn't just silence, it felt like a warning. I walked slowly through the kitchen, running my fingers over the cold surface of the table where Thomas and I had breakfast every morning. I remembered the way he stirred his sugar without looking, always distracted, as if he were solving invisible problems in his head. Back then, I told myself it was just exhaustion, the natural weight of a marriage that had already passed the 30-year mark. Today, I see that some silences don't come from intimacy. They come from distance. I opened the window and smelled the fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, the same one he loved. That smell, once so ordinary, now seemed to carry questions I didn't know how to answer. It's incredible how, after a painful revelation, even your memories change shape. I remembered small scenes, the nights he said he was stuck at the office, the birthdays he rescheduled at the last minute, the quick trips I accepted without questioning because I trusted more than I observed. My mistake wasn't loving too much. It was believing that love was enough to stop someone from living in halves. I walked down the hallway, looking at the framed photos I had hung with so much pride. There we were young, then older, then growing old together. Each picture now felt like a document of a story that maybe only I lived fully. I ran my hand over the frame of our first Christmas in this house and felt a sharp sting in my chest. Not of anger, but of mourning for what I believed we were. His betrayal didn't erase our good moments, but it changed what they meant. And that's the most painful part. Not losing the life you had, but discovering that his version of that life was something else. Hidden, fragmented, incomplete. I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes for a few moments. His cologne still lingered there, soaked into the pillow. I thought about how he always said, "Trust me," with such a calm, steady voice. So steady that I never even considered doubting him. Funny how trust, once broken, turns into a memory that weighs more than the mistake itself. I took a deep breath and understood something for the first time. Before uncovering the secret life he kept, I needed to look, with courage, at the life we actually had, and at the woman I became inside it. That realization would be the first step toward my freedom. That afternoon, when I thought I had already felt everything a woman can feel after being struck by a revelation, fate decided I was still only on the surface. I was sitting on the couch, trying to organize the condolence envelopes neighbors had dropped off, when I heard 3 sharp knocks on the door. It wasn't the gentle tap of a friend, nor the cautious approach of someone grieving. It was firm, calculated, almost professional. When I opened it, I found a man in a dark suit, expression neutral, a leather briefcase hanging from his right hand as if it were an extension of his body. "Mrs. Doyle?" he asked. I nodded, and he handed me a card. Attorney Michael Abrams. I had never heard the name before. "Your husband instructed me to contact you immediately after his passing. There are documents that must be delivered without delay." That sentence hit me like an electric shock. Thomas? Instructions? For after his death? I let him inside, and he placed the briefcase on the table with the precision of someone who knows exactly the weight of what he carries. When he opened it, I saw sealed envelopes, bank statements, contracts, and a metal key attached to a red tag, Unit 3B, Seattle. My body turned cold. Seattle? Thomas rarely mentioned the city, and when he did, it was with the emotional distance of someone discussing routine work logistics. The attorney slid the documents toward me with almost surgical care. Your husband kept a series of commitments and assets that do not appear in the official family records. He asked me to make sure you were made aware. The way he said made aware felt cruel, even though his tone remained completely neutral. Among the papers were bank statements containing amounts I had never seen exit our joint account. There were investments under alternate names. And the most devastating item of all, a parallel will, hidden, detailing the division of assets between the primary family and the secondary family. My name was there, but it wasn't alone. Next to it were two other names, Rachel Moore and Lily Moore. The same names that had fallen over me at the funeral like invisible blades. I looked at the attorney, a knot rising in my throat. Who are these people? I asked, even though I already knew. He inhaled slowly. Mrs. Doyle, I can't go into personal details. My duty is simply to deliver what he left behind. His words sounded rehearsed, shielded by an ethical barrier that excluded me from any real explanations. I felt a surge of anger and whispered, I was his wife. He looked away for a split second, and in that tiny gesture, I saw that he knew far more than he was allowed to say. I picked up the Unit 3B key and felt the metallic weight, heavier than any ordinary object. It wasn't the metal that weighed, it was the story. I thought of all the times Thomas said, I have to sleep at the office. Last-minute meeting. I'll be home late, don't wait up. Each phrase now felt like a brick in the construction of this lie. My mind began stitching memories together. The trips he took alone. The calls he answered in the hallway. The faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. The long explanations for the simple life we supposedly led. At the bottom of the briefcase was more. Hotel receipts with double reservations. Birthday cards signed L. School paperwork. Medical appointments, an entire life happening while I set the table for two. And then came the final blow, a small wooden box, just like the one he kept locked in our bedroom. The attorney pulled it out and set it in front of me. He asked for this to be placed in your hands only. My fingers shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were letters, love letters, all signed by Rachel. Every word a truth I never saw, but that had always existed. Right there, in the center of my living room, I understood that my grief wasn't for my husband's death. It was for the death of the life I believed we had. And with a clarity that stung, I realized the betrayal wasn't new. I was simply new to the truth. I carried the briefcase, the box of letters, and the Unit 3B key to the dining table, like someone transporting the remains of an explosion. I sat down slowly, but my body stayed alert, as if it expected another truth to fall from the air at any moment. The afternoon light came in through the window in a soft orange tone, illuminating the documents in a cruel way. Everything looked so organized, so carefully arranged that it felt impossible to believe it all belonged to a secret life. And yet, there it was. I spread the papers across the table, one by one, and the more I read, the heavier a silent question pressed against my chest. What else didn't I see? I picked up one of the bank statements and immediately recognized a date that made me pause. It was the same weekend I fell ill, and he said he couldn't stay with me because he had a deadline he couldn't postpone. I remembered the sound of the door closing softly, the way he touched my shoulder before leaving. A light, quick touch, almost anxious. I thought it was worry. Now I saw it was urgency. That night, curled up in bed, I told myself I didn't want to be a burden. Today, staring at the hotel reservation with his name and Rachel's, I understood I had never been a burden at all. I was a distraction, a cover, the place he returned to rest, after living. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but the air came in short, shaky bursts. It's strange how the body remembers before the mind does. Suddenly, flashes returned, shirts with unfamiliar perfume, mismatched schedules, his phone always face down. Small things that, together, built a wall of signs I never wanted to interpret. Not because I feared the truth, but because I believed a mature woman's love had enough stability not to be questioned. I was wrong. Not for loving, but for not imagining someone could divide his own heart into compartments so perfectly. As I tried to organize everything, a detail caught my eye. Between Rachel's letters, there was a small note written by someone else. Same feminine handwriting as the ones in the briefcase. The message was short. She asked about you today. You need to come earlier." I held the paper up to the light, looking for hidden writing, and my heart sped up. The handwriting wasn't Rachel's. It wasn't Thomas's either. It belonged to another woman. The lines were hurried, almost familiar, like something I'd seen in notes left by elderly neighbors over the years. The thought flickered past too quickly to grasp, but something inside me tightened, intuition recognizing a shape before the mind could name it. I kept digging through the documents and found another handwritten note. Delivery done. She didn't ask anything. My breath stalled. Who was this woman? What delivery? Why was she involved? For the first time, a shadow appeared at the edge of the truth I thought I had reached. A shadow without a face, but with intention. Feeling the pressure in my chest, I shut the briefcase and walked to the bedroom. The weight of everything was so overwhelming that I needed to sit on the floor, leaning against the bed, grounding myself physically so I wouldn't collapse inside. I ran my hand across the carpet, feeling the rough texture anchor me. I remembered how Thomas always said, "No one helps me. I have to handle everything alone." The irony now was brutal. He had never been alone. He had been surrounded. I let my head fall back, resting against the mattress, and realized the question I had been asking, why did he do this, had already changed. A new one took its place. Who else knew? That thought wouldn't leave me anymore. Not after those notes. Not after seeing the calm, practiced handwriting of a woman I didn't yet know, but who was clearly part of the life he built behind my back. And as night fell gently outside the window, I understood something I didn't want to admit, but had to. I hadn't seen anything yet. The real revelation was only beginning, and the Unit 3B key, pulsing on the table, was the only path to the answers my heart refused to silence. The next day, I woke up before sunrise with the physical sensation that someone had rearranged something deep inside my soul overnight. I walked through the kitchen barefoot, and the cold floor brought a strange type of clarity. I couldn't keep living off pain alone. I needed to understand. I needed to assemble every piece of the story he hid from me. Not from obsession, but because a woman who spent 30 years beside a man deserves to know exactly who she shared her life with. I made my coffee, watching the steam rise like it was sketching the questions I still didn't know how to ask. The familiar smell, once comforting, now felt unsettling, reminding me that at this same table, he wrote messages to another family while I served toast, thinking we were two. I carried the briefcase into Thomas's office, a room I had always respected as his space. Now I realized I hadn't respected a space. I had unknowingly respected secrets. I opened the drawer he had kept locked for years. Strangely, the key I had never found before was sitting there in plain sight, almost as if it had surfaced now as some last cruel irony. The drawer opened with a dry snap, revealing envelopes with old dates, parking receipts, folded maps, access cards to buildings I'd never visited. On one of them, his name was spelled differently, Thomas Moore. The difference of a last name seemed small, but in that moment, it hit me like a siren going off inside my chest. I grabbed an old planner with a hard cover and sat on the floor because I sensed I needed to be close to something solid before facing whatever came next. I flipped through page after page, and the story began stitching itself together with the precision of a ticking clock. On dates he claimed to be traveling for work, I found notes like pick up Lily at 2 p.m., tea with R, dinner at P. Those tiny letters, once innocent scribbles, now blazed like neon signs pointing to the life he lived parallel to mine. Organized, structured, consistent. Each note whispered, "You weren't the center of his life. You were one of the sides." On the desk, his old phone blinked weakly once I powered it on. It had no password. That alone made my stomach tighten, not because it was easy to access, but because the lack of protection revealed something darker. He never expected to be discovered. He trusted too much in my loving blindness. In the old messages, I found photos of Lily as a child, drawings from her school, pictures of Rachel holding a pie captioned attempt number 5, still burnt. Their routine was there, warm, real, lived. My eyes burned not just from betrayal, but from realizing he lived an intimacy he never offered me. When I closed the phone with shaking hands, I noticed the 2 anonymous notes again, the feminine handwriting, hurried strokes, messages suggesting deliveries, surveillance, communication. For the first time, I understood Rachel wasn't the only face in this story. And Thomas hadn't crafted all of this alone. His life had helpers, witnesses, accomplices. And if I wanted the full truth, I would need to follow every thread, every clue, every person involved. I turned back to the metal key labeled Unit 3B. It gleamed in the morning light, almost calling my name. A cold shiver ran through me. I knew that inside that apartment were answers no one would ever give me aloud. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt something that wasn't pain, or anger, or confusion. It was courage. Courage to enter a place where I was never invited, but where I had always existed. Without knowing it, I held the key firmly, took a breath, and whispered to myself in a steady voice, like a quiet pact, if the truth exists, I'm going to find it. All of it. On the drive to Seattle, I noticed my heartbeat settling into a strange rhythm. Not fast, not slow, but determined. I knew I couldn't walk into that apartment alone. Truth can feel like foreign territory, and no one crosses emotional borders without consequence. That's when I thought of Ellen, my friend of 5 decades, the one who knows my breathing before hearing my voice. I called her, trying to sound steady, but everything came out in just 2 words. I need you. She didn't ask why. She simply said, I'm coming. Some friendships don't require explanations, only presence. When Ellen arrived, she carried the kind of strength only women who have already survived life recognize. She hugged me without rush, like someone holding a cracked vase with both hands so it doesn't break further. I handed her the briefcase, the mysterious notes, the old planner, and told her about the Unit 3B key. While I spoke, she listened with the kind of silence that heals. Not the silence Thomas used to hide things, but the one that makes room for truth. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said something that rebuilt the ground under my feet. Marianne, you didn't lose your worth. You only lost someone who never knew how to see it. Her words entered me like warm air in a cold room. We sat at the table, and Ellen began arranging the documents the way someone sets up a battlefield. She separated dates, analyzed patterns, marked timelines with a yellow highlighter. Watching her hands move with such precision made me realize how tired I was of trying to make sense of everything alone. Then she noticed something I had overlooked. 2 repeating entries in the planner, both marked with a small symbol. A red circle next to the letter J. I had brushed it off the day before as an ordinary scribble. Ellen didn't. This, she said, pointing at it, marks a recurring meeting, and the red circle usually signals something sensitive. My stomach tightened. J for what? I asked. Ellen hesitated for just a moment. Maybe Joanne? The neighbor I barely knew, the name that had appeared on the anonymous notes, the shadow hovering at the edges of this story, the name that felt like a warning every time it surfaced. A chill crept up my spine. Not fear, intuition. Ellen stayed focused. Before you step into that apartment, you need protection. Not physical, emotional and legal. She scrolled through her phone, found a number, and handed it to me. Attorney Grace Holloway. She's different, doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't dance around the truth, works with women blindsided by secrets. I hesitated. Ellen reinforced. You can't walk into this with a wounded heart. You need strategy. I breathed in deeply, called the number, scheduled a same-day appointment. Grace's office was just a few blocks from Unit 3B, as if fate had already drawn the map before I could see it. When we arrived, Grace greeted us standing, tall, steady, a woman whose authority didn't need volume. She listened, studied each document with clinical patience, and when we finished, she said, Marianne, this isn't just infidelity. This is structure, a system, and systems like this never operate alone. My heart froze. Ellen glanced at me. We both knew which name hung in the air. Grace continued, her voice unwavering. Before you open any door, you need more than courage. You need strategy, and I'll help you build it. We left her office with Ellen at my side, and for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel like I was walking alone. I had direction. I had support. I had a thread to follow, and I was ready to pull it until the entire truth unraveled before me. The next day, still carrying the strength that Grace and Ellen had placed back into my chest, I returned to Attorney Michael Abrams's office, the man Thomas had chosen to guard his secrets beyond death. The building felt colder than before, as if the walls themselves held more truth than anyone inside was willing to speak. When I stepped into his office, I immediately sensed the tension. He hadn't expected me to return with steadier posture, with support, with the beginnings of a map connecting everything he hoped I wouldn't piece together. I sat across from him, Ellen at my side, and placed on his desk the documents he had selected to give me at the funeral. I watched his expression shift, subtle, nearly invisible, but it shifted. A twitch at the corner of his mouth, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. A man who knows the truth doesn't like when you start knowing it too. "I need clarification," I said, my voice firm as I held the alternate will. "And I won't accept vague answers this time." He interlaced his fingers, adopting that rehearsed professional neutrality, the kind that hides discomfort behind legal etiquette. "Mrs. Doyle, I understand you're emotional, but Thomas was a complicated man. Sometimes people make difficult choices to protect the ones they love." "Protect?" I almost laughed. "He had another family, hidden. That's not protection. That's structured cowardice." He inhaled slowly, then spoke in a tone too soft, the kind men use when they try to make a woman feel fragile. "With respect, you have always shown a certain sensitivity. He may have tried to spare you unnecessary pain." The way he said sensitivity felt like a slap wrapped in silk. Ellen leaned forward. "Sensitivity doesn't stop anyone from understanding the truth. Lies do." He shot Ellen a sharp look, the irritation now clearer. Men like him don't enjoy being confronted by women who don't flinch. "This is a conversation between client and attorney." "She isn't alone," I said before Ellen could answer. "And I'm done being the fragile one in this story. I'm in the clarity stage now." That's when he made his first mistake. He tried to silence me by exhaustion. "Marianne, the best thing for you is to avoid digging. At your age, stress can be my age." The words dropped like a stone. A heat rose from my stomach to my chest. A familiar fury for women my age, the fury of being dismissed with condescension disguised as concern. "If I'm old enough for something," I said slowly, "I'm old enough to stop being treated like someone who doesn't understand her own life." His silence was a confession. Ellen crossed her arms, standing guard beside me. "She wants to know who had access to these documents, who filtered what she was allowed to see, who chose what she received." He replied too quickly. "I didn't filter anything." There it was. The hurried denial, defending himself before anyone accused him, the first real crack. "Then explain this," I said. "Missing dates and statements, duplicate receipts, diverging signatures, and why letters addressed to Rachel weren't given to me at the funeral." His face drained of color. Ellen noticed. I noticed. "Those letters," he stammered, "weren't legally relevant to your rights." Translation, he decided what truth I deserved. Legal gaslighting. Then I pulled out the note in the feminine handwriting, one of the anonymous messages. "Who is Joanne Phillips?" He froze. No blink, no swallow, no shift. Truth cornered him, and he was a man who hated losing control. "Ah," Ellen murmured, recognizing the fear in his stillness. "So there is someone else." He broke the silence with a whisper. "Marianne, don't look for that woman." It wasn't a warning, it was a threat, wrapped in fear. And when someone says, "Don't look," it's because they're terrified of what you'll find. In that moment, with the rising strength of a woman awakened by truth, I understood something. If he wanted to stop me, that's exactly where the truth waited. The first confrontation didn't end with shouting. It ended with certainty. There was a third woman in this story, and she held more power over Thomas's life than Rachel and I combined. I didn't want to enter that apartment in a rush. I wanted to enter aware, prepared, without the kind of innocence that had followed me for 30 years. So the afternoon I finally held the Unit 3B key in front of the door, I took 3 deep breaths. Those long breaths we learn after 50, when life and loss teach us that anything important requires presence. Ellen stood beside me, steady posture, gentle eyes, and that gave me enough courage to turn the key and cross into the world where the life I never lived had taken place without me. The first impact didn't come from the photos. It came from the smell. A blend of soft floral perfume with Thomas's aftershave, a combination that had never existed in my home. The sensation hit me so hard I had to rest my hand on the wall. Right there, in that hybrid scent, was the cruelest portrait of his duplicity. I knew half of the scent of his life. Another woman knew the other half. The living room was neatly arranged with warm, welcoming decor. On the shelf, photographs. Thomas with his arm around Lily at a school performance. Thomas kissing Rachel's forehead during some holiday. Thomas holding a gift box tied with silver ribbon. A small celebration he never mentioned. The shock wasn't his smile. It was how genuine that smile was. A smile I hadn't seen in years. As if another house, another routine, another woman had given back a part of him I didn't even know was missing. As I absorbed it, Ellen called me over. Behind the largest photo, she had found an envelope. Inside was a letter from Thomas that seemed written in a rush. I can't be just one man. I can't choose. You each hold different parts of me. If I lose Rachel, I lose my future. If I lose Marianne, I lose my history. Right then, I understood it wasn't about divided love. It was about shattered identity. He didn't choose because he didn't know how to exist whole, and so he broke us to keep himself in pieces. But the true opening of the subplot came in the bedroom. Inside, there was a box identical to the one I found at home, except this one was open. Inside were tiny personal objects: Lily's childhood bracelets, Father's Day cards, notes written in a child's handwriting saying, "Come back soon, Daddy," and beside them, envelopes with cash and receipts signed by Joanne Phillips. My heart pounded. The missing piece was right there in front of us. I picked up one of the receipts. Message delivered. Another, garage entrance cleared. Another, visit confirmed, no questions asked. Ellen leaned closer and whispered, "She wasn't just a neighbor, she was the bridge." My mind raced, assembling the subplot. Joanne wasn't an observer, she was the mechanism. She knew his schedules, she knew the trips, she knew the lies he fed me, and the lies he fed Rachel. And often, she was the one who made the lies believable. We kept exploring the apartment until we reached the closet, where the story expanded into something bigger. Inside a blue folder, we found documents Thomas clearly feared keeping at home. Contracts under the name Thomas Moore, access logs for another building, statements of cash payments, grocery receipts, and small objects that seemed meaningless alone, but together formed the rhythm of another entire life. And then came the breaking point. As I flipped through a stack of files, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened slowly. Lily stepped in, the same girl from the photos. Her eyes, wide, frightened, locked onto mine, and for a moment the world stopped moving. You're my dad's friend, right?" Her voice was too soft to carry so much deception behind it. He said he couldn't introduce me to his wife because she wouldn't forgive him. My legs weakened. Not from anger, but from deep, aching compassion. Lily didn't know. She was another victim. Another person built inside the architecture of his lies. Another soul living inside a story he curated for her. As she spoke, I realized something crucial. Rachel didn't know the whole truth either. None of us did. We were all living in separate narratives carefully designed by Thomas so they'd fit without overlapping. And there, standing in front of that lost teenager, I understood. The subplot wasn't about infidelity. It was about structural manipulation. His double life was a choice, but the confusion he left behind was a strategy. And I was finally stepping into the heart of the emotional architecture he had built. After Lily left the apartment, still confused, still clinging to a version of her father that had never existed in full, I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, feeling the collision of 3 different worlds inside my chest. Ellen placed a hand on my shoulder but didn't speak. Sometimes the strongest support is a silence that feels like solid ground. I took a deep breath and learned something at that moment. Truth has layers you can only face after accepting the first one. And I was ready to go deeper. We began with the closet. The blue folder inside it seemed to hold the secret map of Thomas's double life. I started sorting through each document while Ellen took notes with her usual, steady precision. The first sheet was a lease contract. The apartment had been rented for 13 years. 13 years of living 2 lives. 13 years of smiling at me while maintaining routines I never knew existed. The pain of that realization was sharp, but strangely, there was also clarity. When you see the full truth, confusion loses its power. We continued. Another folder held medical records from a clinic he visited regularly, but on every form, the emergency contact listed was Rachel Moore. I, his legal wife, appeared only on old records from before Lily was born, which meant his priorities had shifted long before I even sensed distance. As I absorbed that, the ache inside me changed. It wasn't rage, it was lucidity. The understanding of how carefully he had realigned his life while I kept mine anchored to a truth that no longer existed. Among the papers, we found something even more disturbing, a receipt for a personal consultancy provided by Joanne Phillips. The payment was substantial. The service description, logistical management, and external communication. Ellen and I exchanged a knowing glance. It was clear. Joanne wasn't a bystander. She was the orchestrator, the one smoothing the edges of 2 parallel worlds. That same handwriting from the anonymous notes. The third woman in the story. The unseen hinge that let his double life swing open and shut. But what truly tightened my breath was the next box, filled with small objects of emotional weight. Lily's hand-drawn cards, school doodles, candid photos of her sleeping in the back seat of a car. He had been a present father to her, present in ways he had never been with me. Not a matter of competition, a matter of selective presence. He had chosen where to be whole and where to be hollow. While I sat with that realization, Ellen pulled out a thick envelope labeled, "Read if necessary." Inside were printed messages between Thomas and someone saved as JP, unmistakably Joanne. The messages revealed timing, coordination, secrecy. Notes like, "She left the house. You can go. Tell her it's an office emergency. I'll cover the afternoon window." Each line was another thread in the web Thomas had stitched, and Joanne had maintained. Then came the most revealing item of all, a black notebook filled with small, meticulous handwriting. Not a diary of feelings. Thomas didn't have that kind of courage, but a diary of logistics, a control journal, pages detailing observations about me and Rachel. Marianne doesn't ask questions when tired. Avoid important dates with Rachel. Too risky. Joanne provides coverage on Saturdays. Keep the routines separate. Do not overlap. It wasn't improvisation. It wasn't weakness. It was strategy. His lies were an entire infrastructure. One he refined, maintained, perfected. When we finally stepped out of the bedroom, we were no longer two women standing inside the apartment of a betrayal. We were investigators in the center of a system, dismantling it piece by piece. And when Ellen found a business card from the clinic where Thomas received his final treatment, we both felt the same thing. Another piece needed to fall into place. The truth was unfolding not as tragedy, but as freedom. Each layer stripped away returned a part of myself he had tried to bury in shadows. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. We left the apartment with our minds burning, but with a clarity I had never felt before. The clarity that arrives only when truth begins to take shape, with logic, with structure, with a face. We walked to the car slowly, as if each step needed to respect the weight of what we had uncovered. Before turning the key, Ellen looked at me and said, "Marianne, you need someone else. Someone who sees from the outside. Someone who understands emotions. And what all this has done to you." She wasn't talking about a lawyer. She wasn't talking about an investigator. She was talking about healing, not justice. And for the first time since everything began, I realized she was right. That's when Ellen suggested someone unexpected. Dr. Celia Hart, a retired forensic psychiatrist known for working with women who had survived deep emotional manipulation. She's firm, but fair. She won't coddle you. She'll help you build the mental ground before anyone tries to break it again. Ellen said it with the certainty of someone who had lived enough to recognize emotional danger in the air. I agreed, not because I felt fragile, but because I felt exposed. And women in their 60s know that strength is not walking alone. It's knowing when to invite someone who can help rebuild the inner walls. Dr. Celia's clinic was small, welcoming, quiet. She received us with an analytical gaze softened by empathy. Her silver hair, straight posture, and calm presence felt less like authority and more like a lighthouse. We sat before her, and Ellen began explaining, maybe because I was still trying to organize what had shattered inside me. Celia listened with full, unmoving attention. When Ellen finished, the doctor removed her glasses, laced her fingers together, and looked straight into my eyes. "Marianne, you didn't experience a simple betrayal. You lived inside a two-layered system of manipulation. One layer built for you, another for Rachel, and both were supported by a third person dedicated to protecting his version of reality." My chest tightened. "That's why," she continued, "your intuition is so sharp now. This is the moment the mind begins to see what the heart couldn't process before." I stayed silent, absorbing every word. It felt like she was describing Thomas's emotional architecture with surgical precision. Something deep inside me stirred. Not anger, not fear, but the first spark of self-recovery. Celia asked to see the documents, the letters, the receipts. She studied the notes written by Joanne, the short messages, the patterns. Then she said something that shifted the entire landscape. This woman, Joanne, she's not just an accomplice. She's the emotional pivot. She stabilized both narratives. Thomas needed her to keep both lives functioning. Without her, everything would have collapsed more than a decade ago. Ellen and I exchanged a glance, the kind only two women who understand danger can share. Celia continued, more firmly now. Men like Thomas don't maintain double lives alone. They rely on someone who needs to feel indispensable. This person is rarely a lover. It's someone who survives on shadows, someone with low self-worth who feels powerful by guarding secrets. The name hit my mind like a whisper that carried weight. Joanne. And there's more, Celia said, lifting a document from the clinic. The medical records show Thomas listed Rachel as his wife at every recent appointment. That isn't confusion. That's narrative construction. He was legitimizing the parallel life. I felt the world widen, as if my field of vision, blurred by grief, suddenly expanded enough to reveal the entire scheme. But why? I asked. Why lie so deeply? Why not choose? Celia inhaled and answered with devastating calm, because choosing requires courage. Men who construct double lives aren't courageous. They're dependent on the woman who grounds them, and the woman who lets them fantasize. You were the foundation. Rachel, the novelty. Joanne, the mechanism. Her words cut like a scalpel, but healed like one too. Then she leaned slightly forward and gave the warning that changed everything. Prepare yourself. People like Joanne don't react well when their secret power disappears. She may use guilt, confusion, intimidation. She may attempt to reclaim control of the narrative. My entire body froze. She will notice you've unraveled the truth, and she will try to manage the damage. That's when Celia gave me the final piece, the one that turned the entire game. You need evidence, witnesses, and an emotional anchor. Unstructured truth can be used against you. Structured truth cannot be defeated. Ellen squeezed my hand. I inhaled deeply, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just discovering the story anymore. I was reclaiming mine. When we left the clinic, the sun was setting in a golden haze, the kind of light that blesses difficult decisions. And I realized I had changed. I was no longer the woman who had just discovered betrayal. I was the woman who now understood the engineering of the lie. The second ally had entered the story, and now I had emotional, logical, and human armor to face everything that was coming. 2 days after the session with Dr. Celia, I woke with a sensation I couldn't name, a blend of intuition and an internal alarm, the kind women our age learn to trust because it comes from lived wisdom. At 9:13 a.m., and the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. The voice on the other end was a woman's, low, controlled, but trembling beneath the surface. Marianne, we need to talk. It took me a few seconds to recognize her. Rachel. The silence between us stretched longer than necessary before she exhaled and said, Someone came to my door last night. A woman. Hair tied back, firm expression. She said you were confused, and that I should stay away from you. I didn't need her to say the name. It was Joanne Phillips. The silencing had officially begun. I asked Rachel to meet me at a quiet cafe. I arrived first and sat facing the entrance, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Women who've survived emotional earthquakes learn to observe without being seen. When Rachel walked in, she carried the same wounded confusion I had carried at the funeral, the pain of believing a story that was crafted for her. She sat, placed her hands on the table, and for the first time, I saw not the other woman, but another victim. I didn't understand why she knew where I live, Rachel said, voice cracking. But when I asked her name, she said it didn't matter. She just told me to stay away from you, that it would be better for me, and for Lily. The words better for Lily cut deeper than I expected. Thomas had used the same justification to maintain two narratives. Protect the child. Now Joanne repeated it, with the same cadence, the same manufactured concern. A script. Rachel, I said gently, that woman has been involved in his life for much longer than you think. She frowned. Do you know her? I'm beginning to, I replied. And what I'm learning is dangerous enough that pretending otherwise isn't an option. Before she could respond, I felt a presence behind me, silent, measured. I turned slightly. Joanne Phillips was standing there, a few steps away. Not surprised, not hesitant, prepared. She approached with the calm of someone who rehearses control, sat without asking. Her smile was the kind polite people use when hiding knives. Rachel stiffened. I steadied my breath. Ellen wasn't with me, but her courage was. I knew you two would eventually meet, Joanne said, folding her hands. It was only a matter of time. I came to prevent rash decisions. Rash? I asked. Or independent? Her eyes tightened. Barely, but enough. "There's no need for all of this," she said. "Nothing good comes from digging into things Thomas wanted preserved. Preserved, like a legacy, like honorable intentions, like secrets worth protecting." I inhaled slowly. If he wanted preservation, he would have lived one life. He chose two. And you kept the lies intact. Rachel's eyes widened. Joanne swallowed hard. A crack in the mask. "I helped him because he needed it," she snapped. "Some men can't handle pressure. They need someone to balance things." "Balance?" I repeated. "Or manipulate." She froze for 3 seconds. Not hesitation, calculation. "You should be thanking me," she insisted. "I prevented conflict. I prevented pain." Rachel let out a small, disbelief-filled laugh. "You talk like you did us a favor." "I did," Joanne said, voice trembling with righteous indignation. "Thomas trusted me. He depended on me. I was the only one who knew everything." And then came the slip. Small, but fatal. He promised me I'd be recognized for it. I leaned forward, locking my gaze with hers. "But he didn't recognize you. Not in the will. Not in any documents. You spent years in the shadows, and he left you right there." Her face broke, not visibly, but internally. A shift behind the eyes, a fracture in her identity. She stood abruptly, voice shaking for the first time. "You don't understand. He needed me. He trusted me more than any of you." I rose too, calm, steady. Trust isn't love, and control isn't help. She tried recovering the mask, but it had already slipped. "If you push this," she said, "you'll destroy everything he tried to keep in order." "He destroyed the order," I replied. "We're just cleaning up after him." She stared at me, the stare of someone realizing their power was gone. Then she turned and walked out. Not fast, not slow, but at the pace of someone whose story had just been taken from her hands. Rachel watched her leave, tears brimming. And inside my chest, something rose. Not victory, not revenge, clarity. The second confrontation was over, and now, the truth had no cage left. After the confrontation at the cafe, I went home with a cold certainty running down my spine. Joanne would not back down. People who live in shadows panic when the truth slips from their hands. They try to rewrite events, reposition themselves, reshape reality. I knew this type, not because I'd dealt with one before, but because women my age learn to recognize manipulators by the silence they leave behind. And Joanne was desperate to control hers. I sat on the couch, took a deep breath, and did something I hadn't done even at the funeral. I cried. Not for Thomas, but for the version of myself that trusted him for 3 decades. Ellen held me without a word, and when the tears stopped, a new kind of clarity settled inside me. The kind that comes only when the last tear has dried. It was time to turn the game around. Not for revenge, not to hurt Rachel or Lily, but to reclaim my story, and to stop Joanne from rewriting what didn't belong to her. The next morning, we went straight to Grace Holloway's office. She greeted us with that firm posture that seemed to restore order to whatever room she entered. We laid everything out: the documents, the anonymous notes, the receipts, and the cafe incident with Joanne. Grace listened, took notes, marked important sections, and then built a diagram on the wall. Thomas in the center, me on one side, Rachel and Lily on the other, and Joanne orbiting the chaos like a dark satellite. "Marianne," she said, "you don't need to destroy anyone to regain control. You just need to reveal the right truths, at the right time." I frowned. "Reveal to whom?" "To the people who matter," she answered. "To the ones who were harmed. To the ones who tried to silence you." Then she outlined the plan. Step 1. Formally document everything. Every receipt, note, statement, and timeline. Grace hired an independent auditor, Sylvia, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, known for tracking hidden financial patterns. She looked at me and said, "Money doesn't lie, especially secret money." I trusted her instantly. Step 2. Gather testimony before Joanne could interfere. Rachel agreed to give a statement, including the nighttime visit from Joanne. This would make it harder for Joanne to twist the narrative later. Step 3. Request the medical records from the clinic where Thomas presented Rachel as his wife. Official documents can break false intimacy, Grace explained. Institutions don't forget what they write. Step 4. Establish emotional alignment between me and Rachel before Joanne could pit us against each other again. We invited Rachel to a meeting at Grace's office. She arrived fragile, but Grace treated her with dignity, And I explained everything: the manipulation, the logistics, the two-layered deception. When I finished, Rachel whispered, "I thought you were my enemy. Now I see. I was deceived too." It was the beginning of a fragile, necessary alliance. Step 5. Set an emotional and legal trap to expose Joanne's real nature. Grace explained, "People like her don't tolerate being excluded. They react by revealing themselves. That's when we catch the truth in the open." She crafted the message I would send to Joanne: neutral, controlled, deceptively calm. "We need to talk about what Thomas left. There are new documents. I want to settle this fairly. Not aggressive, not accusatory. Just enough to ignite insecurity." I sent it with steady hands. 15 minutes later, Joanne answered, "Do not make decisions without me. I know things you don't. I need to see those documents." Grace smiled, the subtle smile of someone watching a strategy fall into place. "Now," she said, "we give her the rope." Step 6. Invite Joanne to a neutral meeting with quiet witnesses, not to humiliate her, to stop her from controlling the narrative. Sylvia would sit in the back. Ellen would be beside me. Rachel too. All present, all silent, all listening. We chose a calm community center. When Joanne entered and saw all of them, her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, enough to reveal fear, enough to confirm the trap had worked. She tried to smile, tried to act in control, tried to reclaim the center of the story, but the room had shifted. Her power was gone. I spread the documents on the table, one by one, and before I even began speaking, I felt it inside me. I was no longer afraid. I took a breath and said, with a steady voice, "Everything you tried to hide is already in the light." Her eyes trembled, her hands too, and for the first time she understood. The truth was no longer hers to manage. The counterattack had begun, and nothing could stop what came next. The community center seemed too quiet for the weight of what was about to unfold. Pale walls, polished wood, soft echoing footsteps, the kind of space meant for children's recitals or town meetings, not for dismantling a system of lies that had spanned 3 decades. But that room would witness the end of the architecture Thomas had built, and the collapse of the woman who had kept it standing. I sat at the main table with Ellen at my right, Rachel across from me, and Sylvia positioned a few feet behind, clipboard in hand, observing everything. Grace hadn't arrived yet. She would come at the exact moment she was needed. The plan depended on letting Joanne talk. People who live on control always reveal too much when they feel it slipping away. When Joanne entered, she wasn't the same woman who confronted us at the cafe. Something in her posture had fractured. Her hair was pulled too tightly, her steps too measured, her smile just slightly off, the smile of someone who had practiced being calm in the mirror but couldn't steady her own heartbeat. She scanned the room, pausing on each of us, calculating. "Marianne," she said with a forced softness, "I wasn't expecting an entire audience. I thought we could handle this. Woman to woman." Her words were a trap, an attempt to draw me into an intimate circle she controlled. I didn't step into it. "That's exactly what we're doing," I replied. "But this time, with witnesses." Her eyes flickered to Ellen, then Rachel, then Sylvia. A tightness crossed her jaw, the first visible crack. "There's no need for all this," Joanne said, taking a seat without being invited. "There's nothing to hide." The irony was sharp enough to cut air. I placed the first envelope on the table, the receipts with her signature. "You worked with Thomas for more than a decade." Her chin lifted. "I helped him, yes. He needed someone reliable." "Reliable," I repeated slowly. Interesting choice of word. "He trusted me more than anyone," she added quickly. Too quickly. Ellen arched a brow, a silent note that Joanne had given us her first mistake. I placed another set of papers on the table. "You weren't simply helping, you were being paid." Joanne's face tightened, but she forced out a smooth reply. "It was work. Nothing illegal about work, but deeply illegal," Rachel said quietly, "about helping someone maintain 2 families and hiding it from both women." That one landed. Joanne's breath hitched. A brief, sharp pull. I pushed the planner forward, the one filled with Thomas's coded notes. "Let's talk about this," I said. "Joanne provides Saturday coverage. Joanne monitors timing. Joanne ensures separation." Her hands trembled, fingertips tapping the table, a silent Morse code of panic. "He was organizing his life," she insisted. "He was organizing lies," I corrected. Rachel leaned forward, eyes glossy with anger and grief. "You watched us cry. You watched us trust him. You watched him divide himself, and you kept us apart. Why? Joanne's mask slipped for a second, just a second. She inhaled sharply. I did what he asked me to do, but you liked it, Ellen said, voice low, steady. You enjoyed being the gatekeeper. A flicker of fury crossed Joanne's face. I helped stabilize everything. Without me, none of this would have worked. Her own words hung in the room like a confession. I spoke gently, leaning forward. Why did he need you so badly, Joanne? She hesitated, the longest hesitation yet. Her throat moved as she swallowed something hard. Because, her voice cracked, because he couldn't handle everything alone. But you handled it, I said softly, and the truth poured out of her in a tremble. He depended on me. I was the only one who knew everything. I mattered. The room stilled, not because of what she said, but because of what lay beneath it. She didn't serve the lie for loyalty. She served it because it made her feel essential, seen, important. Years of invisibility condensed into one role, the keeper. That's when the pivotal moment arrived. He promised me, she whispered. He promised that when everything came out, I would have my place. I leaned in, eyes steady. Your place where, Joanne? In which family? In what life? He had two, and neither had room for you. Her face broke, not outwardly, internally. A collapse behind the eyes, the shattering of her private fantasy. Before she could recover, I placed the black notebook on the table, the logistics diary. Tell me, I said, calm as stone. Why is your name in his notes more than mine? More than Rachel's? She blinked rapidly, panic rising. Because he trusted me? No, I corrected. Because he used you. Her breath stopped for a beat. He told me, she whispered, hands shaking, that I was the most important person in his life. I responded with the gentlest truth, the one that would break her denial. He told that to all of us. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just broke. That's when the door opened. Grace stepped inside. Tall, calm, precise. Her presence sliced the air. Good afternoon, she said. Joanne Phillips, I need to inform you that your involvement in the concealed routines of Mr. Thomas Doyle has now been formally documented. Anything you say from this point forward may be used as evidence of collusion, emotional interference, and attempted witness suppression. Joanne turned white. Rachel covered her mouth. Ellen sat taller. I simply breathed, deeply, for the first time. I didn't do anything illegal, Joanne whispered. Grace placed the medical records on the table, the ones listing Rachel as Thomas's wife. You did, she said. And worse, you did it knowingly. Joanne pushed back from the table, panic surging. Sylvia subtly blocked the exit, clipboard in hand, stance unmovable. You were never the central figure, Ms. Phillips, Grace continued. You were a tool, and now you're a liability. Joanne's voice rose in desperation. He said I mattered. He said I meant more to him than... He lied, I said softly. And with those two words, her entire world collapsed. She staggered back, tears finally spilling. Not of remorse, but of identity crumbling. For 20 years, she had built her sense of worth on a man who never saw her in daylight. She left the room in a daze, not looking at any of us. And when the door closed behind her, something inside me aligned. Not triumph, not vengeance, freedom. The climax wasn't breaking Thomas's lie. It was reclaiming myself from it. And closing the door he kept open for 30 years. Not for me, but for the lives he lived that never included me. The days that followed the confrontation felt like walking across a field after a violent storm. The ground still damp, broken branches scattered everywhere, yet the air finally breathable. Everything looked different, not because of the pain, but because of the clarity. Once truth settles, it rearranges even the silence of a home. And my silence, for the first time since Thomas died, no longer felt like accusation. It felt like a beginning. Grace took charge of the legal aftermath. With the evidence, the receipts, the sworn statements, and the clinic records, she filed a partial contestation of the will. Not to erase Rachel, and certainly not to harm Lily, but to remove anything rooted in fraud, manipulation, or covert payments, especially those involving Joanne. What is fair stays. What is shadow goes, she said. And for the first time, justice didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. Joanne was subpoenaed. The police collected her testimony. She tried to frame her involvement as doing favors, but the receipts with her signature, the texts saved by Thomas, and the handwritten notes crushed that version. The prosecutor offered her a deal. No jail time, but strict legal restrictions. She was barred from approaching me, Rachel, or interfering with any inheritance matters. The woman who had spent 20 years orbiting Thomas's double life ended up with the only thing she truly feared: distance. The silence she once used to control now belonged to the law, not her. Rachel began to approach me, carefully, respectfully, step by step. We had long conversations, painful ones, but honest. She told me she had also been deceived, that she believed she was the primary partner, that she didn't know about my anniversary dinners spent alone, my nights waiting, my unanswered questions. For the first time, I realized that although our roads were different, our wounds were made of the same fabric. One morning, while we sipped coffee together, she said, "I don't want to carry guilt for what he did. Only what belongs to me." I smiled. Then we're starting from the same place. And Lily, sweet, unexpected Lily. 2 weeks later, she knocked on my door holding a sketchbook. "I wanted to show you what I drew for my dad," she said. Pages filled with colors, drawings of a family she believed was whole. I listened quietly, and she listened to my version at her own pace, slow, careful, without pressure. One day, as she hugged me before leaving, she whispered, "You seem like someone my dad would have loved a lot." It was the first time I cried from tenderness, not pain. With the legal pieces settling and the emotional debris finally named and sorted, I made a choice. I didn't want to destroy the other family. I wanted to rebuild myself. So I accepted the fair division of assets. I kept what was rightfully mine and preserved what mattered for Rachel and Lily. When Grace raised an eyebrow and said, "You're giving up a lot," I answered, "I'm letting go of what no longer belongs to me." From grief to revelation, revelation to truth, truth to liberation. Each phase fit into place as if life had finally stopped hiding the logic of its storms. And one evening, sitting on my porch with Ellen beside me, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. Not because the story was ending, but because something new was beginning. Justice had arrived. Dignity had been restored. And my voice, at last, belonged fully to me. 3 months later, my house doesn't feel the same. Not because I changed the furniture, but because I changed from the inside out. There's a new lightness in the air, the kind that appears only when you stop living inside the wound. I wake early, make my coffee slowly, watching the steam rise like a quiet reminder that my life now has room to breathe. The empty side of the bed doesn't ache anymore. It's just space, not loss. Walking down the hallway, I look at old photographs not as injuries, but as chapters. Chapters I lived sincerely, even if he didn't. I learned that my story isn't defined by what someone hid from me. My story is defined by the woman who survived those hidden truths, and who rose from them with more clarity and dignity than before. Rachel and I maintain a gentle, respectful connection. Sometimes we text about Lily's school projects, small victories, small fears. Nothing forced, nothing pretending to rebuild what never truly existed. But something real grew between us. Acknowledgement. A recognition that we were two women hurt by the same man in different ways, and neither of us chose that. We simply chose what came after. And Lily, she has become a frequent visitor. She brings sketchbooks, teenage stories, shy questions about life. She calls me Miss Marianne, with a softness that heals. It's strange how, even in the aftermath of destruction, life finds places to bloom you never expected. Today, when I close my eyes, I no longer see Thomas living two lives. I see myself living one, whole. I see my strength, my quiet, my renewed sense of self. And I've realized something I want every woman watching me to understand. Truth doesn't break you. It only breaks what was never yours. And once that falls away, what remains is who you always were. So if this story touched you, if you found yourself in my steps, or if you simply walked beside me through every chapter, I ask you, from the heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, share this video with someone who needs to hear this today, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to hear your voice. I want to know your city. I want to know you, because none of us walk through stories like this alone. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'll see you in the next story and in the next beginning.